Welcome to the Leeds Rhinos Podcast, episode 35. Change of venue this week with the Test match cricket happening at AMT Headingley. We're down here at the Bardercard Training Complex in the heart of the Leeds Rhinos preparations for this week's game against Lee Leopards. Delighted to be joined by Scott Grix, Leeds Rhinos assistant coach. We'll look back on Friday's disappointing loss over at St Helens, but look ahead to another big night at AMT Headingley this Friday against Leigh Leopards coming up later on. And just in terms of how the team responds to that setback at Saints, and we'll get an insight from Scott around what's happening with those preparations. Scott, we'll start with Friday's result, a disappointing result, especially on the run we had been on. You've had the review. Any things that have really popped out from why we managed to get that loss?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, they're all disappointed. We're all disappointed. It's usually a bit of a sad morning when you've had one, and we haven't had one for a little bit, like you said. So a bit of a different morning for us today. Identified a few things post game that they felt and us as coaches felt. Cleared a little bit of that up today. Disappointing because we probably thought we still had chances to win the game too. We weren't playing like anything like we've played for the last month. Now reality is we did put a 5-game win streak together there, but we're not going to go all the way till the end of the year unbeaten. It happens at some point. So now it's how we respond from it, get the fixes that we need, and then go from there really. But yeah, on what was a hot night and going in pretty confident, it was a bit of a disappointment, yeah.
You mentioned there your thoughts immediately after the game. Is it often what your first reactions are what it then turns out when you look at the tape, or can you be surprised sometimes?
Yeah, you can be. I think it's hard to. You're obviously a bit emotional immediately in the moment in the game. Sometimes you can think a bit emotional, so it's a good chance for everybody to get that little period so that you don't say too much after the game, can't pinpoint everything, you can get a feel for it. But yeah, most of the time it's some of them games where you emotionally think, oh my God, that were awful and this went wrong, that went wrong. You then check it back and you weren't that far away. And vice versa, some games where you absolutely destroy someone, maybe you weren't actually as good as you thought you were. So it is important to reflect and not speak immediately, but we were just off a little bit here and there in the game, which kind of fed throughout for different stuff, whether that be from a defence point of view or from an attack point of view. We're just off a little bit compared to our standards, at least. Which, again, looking at it, if regardless of the score in the first half, even heading towards the middle of the second half, where our penalties and errors were that far away from us compared to what they have been recently, we still felt like we had enough to win the game. So still plenty of positives to come out with it. Chance to respond this week.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the standards, and that's the key thing. It's the standard we set ourselves, and in terms of our errors and things like that, it's so uncharacteristic from this group of players we've seen this year. Do you, whilst you have to fix that up, do you also have to not overreact and take on board what the evidence you've seen from the other games as well?
Yeah, and if it was the same person on the same error, on the same play, or the same tackle selection, then we start to have a different conversation. But when they're so far spread across the board, we obviously don't plan for that. So it's really hard. I think we've put a big emphasis on our penalties and errors, and you alone are responsible for a lot of that. And generally, somebody will have a poor game. In fact, someone will have a stinker at some point. Potentially that happens again this week. But if everyone else covers their own stuff, you can generally get away with that one because everyone else is on board and either covering his back or just making sure they nail their roles. When you creep into 2 or 3, 4 and 5 doing it, it's really hard to cover it up for that amount of time. So they're all feeling a little bit down about that, and obviously we now go into a reasonably shortish turnaround and we get to do that right. So if everyone picks a little bit more individually, gives a little bit more that way, I don't think we'll have the same issue.
And looking at the game specifically, interesting. I thought that Saints opted to kick those 2 penalties, most unlike Saints. Like we over the years, we've known Saints to be the the entertainers who like to throw the ball around. I suppose that was a backhanded compliment to us in terms of how strong defensively we've been this year, that they thought they needed to take the points when they were offer.
Yeah, I think so. And with it being, it was obviously, it was the same for both teams anyway, but there's a bit of heat in there. They were missing a couple of players that they would maybe look to generate a little bit of their attack. So, they're never ever short on effort, that's for sure. So when you're just a yard away from a few things and you've got a side that's full of enthusiasm and effort, regardless of what plays happen in the game, it's a tough one. Not taking any credit away from them. They played the best they could play and put them in a position to get the win. But I still feel, even going into the back end of the game there, I felt like if we cut a couple of errors out and nailed a couple of things that we'd planned to do, I still think we come out on top.
And we made a great start to the second half. Riley gets his try, and suddenly it feels like, right, we're back on the horse now. Unfortunately, at that point, we weren't able to just string a passage of play together to get our noses in front.
Yeah, and then the main thing with our things at the weekend where they were compounded, so we didn't finish a set how we wanted it to on our terms, which resulted in scrambling around a little bit, which results in a penalty, and then you're not only messing one thing up, you end up messing another thing up. So just too much of it. But again, look, we haven't been looking at this for the last month and thinking and building to try and get out of it. We've actually been building the other way. As you've seen yourself, we've strung a month together that we can be proud of. We know we're not hitting our ceiling yet, and we're still trying to get there. So for us, we don't want to lose. We're taking every game as its same importance as everything else, but it's happened, and now it's next job.
Yeah, and that level of consistency across every week of the season is so hard to do. That's why so few teams are able to do it. We saw the other results at the weekend. Obviously, Huddersfield getting their win over at Warrington, Wigan losing at Wakefield. It is tough to produce your best every single week, isn't it? But that's the aim.
Yeah, it is. Now, we're chasing perfection that nobody is ever going to get. So it's about who can stick to that for the longest. Now, if you look at Wigan and OKR, you've got teams there that have been doing it for a lot longer consistency probably than we have. So for them, they can get themselves into maybe a sticky patch that we're seeing at the minute and still come out the other side. So we're aiming for that. And obviously we've still got a bit to go with it. So
just looking at the stats there from the game, most tackles Jared O'Connor, as we would expect, 51, James McDonald 31, James Bentley 28, just shows those middles, the amount of work those guys are getting through there. Lockie Miller had the most runs, unsurprisingly Ryan Hall most metres for that long range run, 201 metres, and Sam was only 125 metres. Sam really made an impact when he came off the bench, didn't he?
Yeah, so the spread there across a bunch of players that were still high in terms of numbers. So although we may have been off in terms of execution, maybe a little bit of not nailing game plan or our roles, they're still throwing quite a lot of effort out there. And at times, obviously, it was secondary to what we needed it to be. So rather than getting the first thing right and front loading a little bit, we ended up with some chase backs and some bits that put us out of sync a little bit. But we're not questioning that, I don't think. Obviously, yeah, you just mentioned a couple of people there. Sambo's stint off the bench there. And then when we got him back in there to get a little bit of momentum to put us in with a shot of winning the game at the end, or at least getting back in the mix, really helped. Jared's in obviously playing in a tough spot and he's repeatedly getting those numbers. So reliable. Just had too many people off at the same time, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and it's noticeable when you compare the stats for both teams that how close the game was, but they were able to ice their chances in terms of runs and meters and gain lines and line breaks. They made significantly more line breaks than us, but the rest of it and the tackles pretty similar between the teams, but they took their chances.
Yeah, and it was quite physical, obviously. And they scored on play off a scrum, and then they scored right on the bell. So a couple of a kind of lightning bolters as opposed to it being going set for set and then breaking us down. So Yeah, tough one. It was a big game. Everywhere's a big game for us. We were looking forward to going there. Now we're back home this week. Good chance to respond. Fix some stuff tomorrow in prep and go again from there. I know Langer spoke a bit about the prep last week. We needed this. We'll be into our main day tomorrow after checking all out the remainder of our Leigh footage today. So expecting a confident attacking team in Leigh, going over to France this week, obviously, and getting their win over there. So good challenge for us.
Just finally on the Saints game, you mentioned there the try from the scrum. We've seen it across the competition how much of a real attacking threat that is for team. How hard is it to defend those scrum plays, particularly near your own line where they've got a full field to attack you?
Yeah, and obviously nobody's coming up with anything that's out of the ordinary. There might be the odd trick play here and there that somebody's done, but somebody's going to pinch it at some point and it'll start to roll around. It's just the timing on it's got to be absolutely perfect from an attack point of view. And if you can't defend it, the D's got to be off a tiny little bit. So as we discussed earlier, we were off in a little bit here and there in them areas. And if you are and they execute absolutely perfect, it is hard to stop. So we'll have a look at fixing that again this week. But it's nothing new for us. We attempt to, put ourselves in them scenarios during the week to defend it, and generally we're pretty good. You just got to be on it all the time, haven't you? It's one of them tough.
Very good. Well, that puts Saints to bed. Looking ahead now to Leigh, and they're a side that we've had some great tussles with in recent times. They had a big win down in Catalans. Whilst Catalans have struggled recently, they seem to really find some fire in their belly against Leigh, and Leigh had to work hard to get that win.
Yeah, so it's our first time seeing Leigh. So, obviously usually by this point we played Saints this week. We've already got some previous footage. We've obviously played them twice. So we're kind of going, not unknown, but we haven't played them yet in this season. So delve a little bit deeper into that. And yeah, they're a confidence punch. They're really hard to handle with the ball. So as you've seen from the weekend, if you're off a tiny little bit, you'll put yourself on the pump. So we're well aware of that. But having come now off a loss, I'm excited about seeing the response and seeing, can we look after a decent attacking team as good as we have been doing over the last month and get our standards back where they need to be.
And as a coach, you mentioned there being excited. Whilst you wouldn't want a defeat, is it something that excites you as a coach? Go, right, we've got something we need to fix up here and test ourselves this week.
Yeah, well, we've won from a few different ways this year. We've come from behind. We've been in a really tight game and just managed to see it out. And then we've been winning and kind of got over the top of them and scored a couple of extra tries. So the scenarios that we practice. And then so there was one again there at the weekend where we needed 2 scores. Well, how do we go about that set? So interesting to look back and have a discussion about that and kind of make sure the lads are prepped for next time that happens, so you don't essentially run out of time. It'd be easy enough to say, right, we need to win the game. What's your best play? Like there'd be an argument to say, why aren't you running that in the first 2 minutes then, if that's your best play or your shape? But it's all different, and so you're gonna get a lot of learns out of either game. But yeah, I wouldn't say you're not over the moon that you've lost, so you can get a little bit more fixes in there. But every game's the same. But yeah, it's generally a bit different this week because we've gone 5 games. We haven't lost for a month, so it's an interesting week for us to see where we're at as a group and can we continue to go that way.
Yeah, and Leigh are a team that like back themselves to attack from anywhere. Is that they're a real threat or anywhere on the field, whether they're in their own half or otherwise?
Yeah, across the board really. Obviously the spine, deceptive and digging to the line pretty good. You've got Ipape there that's, if you are switched off all around the ruck from any quick play the ball or an offload, will damage you a little bit. And across the board there with the back 5, they're all athletic things, aren't they? So they're definitely a threat, which is why a lot of their games are high scoring, because they do manage to put a lot of points on people. So that'll be definitely obviously a focus of us, but we're not really looking at how many points you score or whether we can get back on and get another win. At this point, we are improving what we did last week and getting another performance in. Pretty confident. The lads know what the fixes were from the game. They were pretty calm still out there in the middle of the mayhem. So we're getting there. We keep building, see where we go this week.
Obviously, will be some changes to the squad this week. Morgan Gannon went off with that injury. Any update on Morgan and how he is?
No injury yet. He's obviously a little bit sore this morning, but he copped it from both ends in the game. He took a head knock to begin with, came back out there from that, got bashed early doors in the sequence coming back from that, and then ended up getting his leg caught. So unfortunate for Gano, because he's strung a bunch of games together there where he's been a real threat for us. And obviously he's moving on at the end of the year, so we're enjoying getting what we've got out of Gano so far. Whichever way that works round, we've got somebody else will be in there to cover that spot, and we'll get Gano back in the mix when we can.
And one new addition to the group, rugby union player Jack Metcalf's come in from Newcastle Falcons on a 1 month trial. First of all, what are you expecting from him? Obviously, he's come from rugby union, so he's learning the game as well. But he's a Leeds lad, so he'll want to make an impression.
Yeah, super keen, local boy, and obviously from the feedback we've had and Langer's involvement previously, very knowledgeable. So in order of looking at how we're playing and what we're doing, we're hoping and we're expecting that he's going to take it on board pretty quickly. He's been in the mix there with the boys this morning. Had a little look at some stuff from afar to get a feel for it on the field. Chucked himself in for some reps, and it'll go both ways. And we're expecting him to be picking the lads' brains and certainly coming for us for info. We'll do the same with him and just give him the best opportunity to see how he goes in this environment. So yeah, see how he gets on this week.
And do you think that's something that rugby league could tap more into? That rugby union players, obviously, we've seen Christian Wade gone to Wigan, and we over the last couple of years we've had younger lads come through to give it a try. It's a potential opportunity for player recruitment.
We've had a couple through the door, haven't we? And different bits that I'm worked out, but obviously Alfred Johnson spent a little bit of time with us and did the same. Really diligent, got as many clips as he could done, as many reps as he could done in the period of time that we're here. And obviously, I'd like to think we helped him a little bit in his progression, then going forward, and ended up making his Super League debut on the back of it. Now, there are a bunch of people in their kind of bracket that are suited to this game in terms of an athletic point of view, outside back, like Wade going to Wigan there, and if they can pick it up pretty quickly, then I'm sure there's a spot for them somewhere in there. Obviously, for them, it's about doing as much work as they can. They're not just going to be able to come here and fall straight into it, because it is super different, obviously, going the other way too. So we'll do our best to make sure we help him with his stuff, and hopefully he gets the best out of his opportunity.
Brilliant. Well, it's great to hear from you, Grixie. We'll be back on Thursday for the Q&A edition. Make sure you get your questions in. info@therhinos.co.uk. Can be on anything around the club, and we'll get the answers for you from the people who know all the information for you. Remember to subscribe, and so you keep in touch with all things Leeds Rhinos. We have got another edition of the Knock On Effect, the ever popular podcast with Jared O'Connor and Tom Nicholson Watt, and that's in the pipeline. Hopefully I'll have that out later this week. And remember to keep in touch with all our podcasts by subscribing wherever you normally get your podcast. Do give us a 5-star review, because it helps keep us up those charts and spread the word about Leeds Rhinos, and let as many people as possible know about what we're doing here at AMT Headingley. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Thursday for the Q&A edition. If not, can't wait for Friday night. Lee Leopards are at AMT Headingley. It's going to be a bumper game. Two teams very close in the table. Great competitive fixture on Friday night under the floodlights at AMT Headingley. So make sure you get along and give the boys a cheer. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.